Now, as we've been saying this morning, a flare-up in tensions between Iran and Israel has been dialed down, although Israel has been continuing its military action in Gaza. And relations between different countries in the Middle East are very complicated. Let's see what current events might mean for all that. We can speak to Nabila Ramdani, who's a French journalist, broadcaster and academic of Algerian descent, who specialises in Islamic affairs and the Arab world. Thank you for joining us this morning on the programme. So, firstly, then, the governments of the Arab world are split between those who are sympathetic to Iran and then those whose relationship is one of enmity. Can you take us through supporters of Iran and those that don't support Iran and why that is?
Well, good morning. Well, I think the first thing to say is that the question of Iran suddenly shot to the fore of the Israel-Palestine conflict on the 1st of April after Israel attacked the Iranian Consulate in Syria. At least a dozen people were killed, including two high-ranking generals. And it has to be said that attacks on diplomatic missions are incredibly rare historically, even in the highly charged Middle Eastern cauldron. And it was not until April the 13th, that Iran did actually strike back on Israel with a calibrated drone and missile attack that was largely repelled by Israeli forces working with its allies. And some of the missiles damaged the Israeli airbase from which the Israel missile attacks on Iran's consulate in Syria was launched. And there was sadly one civilian wounded. And, in turn, Israel hit back with its attack around Isfahan yesterday. And we await the next stage in this very unpleasant tit-for-tat saga. But as you said, what is clear, however, is that the saga is certainly drawing attention away from the ongoing mass killing in Gaza, which is being described as a full-blown genocide. And it is in this context that we are seeing alliances being formed in the Arab world. It has to be said that alliances in the Middle East are extremely fluid, and this is particularly so at times of extreme crisis, such as now. And as far as Iran is concerned, there is no clear-cut split between one side of the Arab world and another, and instead all Arab countries are being extremely pragmatic. I think the knee-jerk reaction in the West to any conflict in the Middle East is for everybody to immediately support Israel. But in the Arab world, pragmatic decisions are made at all times, and the situation is changing all the time. But we do know that Arab countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia have already massively angered Iran by helping to destroy the country's drones and missiles during Iran's attack on Israel last weekend. And this shows their increasing alignment with America rather than with Israel per se. But again, what they did was heavily criticized in other parts of the Arab world. And I think despite treaties signed between Israel and a few neighboring Arab countries, such as Jordan and Egypt, the traditional position of all Arab countries remains to support Palestinians. And this, of course, means opposing the state of Israel. And this goes back to the extremely violent way Israel was created in 1948 and the sense of betrayal that the Arab world still feels about what happened.
Is there a difference between the way governments have reacted to all this and the reaction on what is known as Arab Street?
Yes, absolutely. I think clearly there are millions in the Arab world who are very unhappy with often super rich Arab countries supporting Israel as it carried out an alleged genocide against Palestinian Arabs. And as with anywhere else in the world, the government position doesn't always reflect the views of millions of ordinary people. But I suppose the staunchest allies of Iran remain countries such as Syria and Yemen, for example. Syria is usually called Iran's closest ally, despite the conflict between the Arab nationalism ideology of Syria's secular ruling Ba'ath Party and Iran's pan-Islamist policy. Iran and Syria have had a strategic alliance ever since the Iran-Iraq war, when Syria sided with non-Arab Iran against neighboring Ba'ath-ruled Iraq. And the two countries shared a common animosity towards then Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, and they coordinated against the United States and Israel. And Syria continues to cooperate with Iran in sending arms to Palestinian groups, including Hamas and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And this is why the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada have designated both Iran and Syria as state sponsors of terrorism, in part due to support for Hamas and Hezbollah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us this morning and laying that out a bit more for us so we can understand it. It's Nabila Ramdani there, French journalist and broadcaster.